Hi, this is Scott Langford. I am one of the executive board members of the Global Educators Network, here today with Pia Walawalkar, who I'll introduce, and then we're going to have a long conversation about internationalizing and globalizing community college libraries, and really all libraries. This is a follow-up to an inquiry meetup that we had in late September, in which Pia was one of our main presenters. Pia Walawalkar is an associate professor and Equity and Outreach Librarian at Skyline College. She holds a master's degree in English literature from the University of Mumbai, Germanic Languages and Literatures from Ohio State University, and a library and information science from Kent State University. As if that wasn't enough degrees, she's currently pursuing her doctorate in educational leadership from San Francisco State University. At Skyline College, which is my local community college in Daly City, California, and Pacifica, near San Francisco, Pia teaches critical information literacy, plans and implements social justice-centered events, and supports faculty to create zero textbook cost courses and equity-focused, culturally responsive curriculum. Her research interests include critical information literacy, meta-literacy, and critical and global citizenship education. And in 2020, she co-published an article called Teaching Meta-Literacy in the Religious Studies Classroom, which I hope that we'll also have time to talk about. So hi, Pia, welcome to the Stanford Gen channel.
Hello, Scott. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, here's my favorite opening question with all of us, because most people come into community colleges in a sort of wonderfully winding and adventurous way. So how does it come to be that you're currently an equity librarian and associate professor at Skyline Community College, near where Scott Langford happens to live in the Bay Area?
Um, it sounds like such a cliched answer. Like I just kind of fell into it, but I feel like that is the answer. Where I grew up in Mumbai, India, and we did not, neither did we have community colleges nor public libraries, and libraries did not have the same kind of presence that they are here. So I left India to kind of really live the worlds that I had read in the books. I was not very happy with what I saw around me when I was growing up. So my way was like actually just find refuge in books. And then eventually, then I wanted to be actually in the places that I read about or what I read. After getting my master's in English literature, as you just mentioned, I went and did my master's in German literature, which also took me to Germany for some years, working at OCLC as a cataloger, cataloging in several languages. And that too, also, it was something that just happened. I always feel like things happen to me, and that just
Wow.
happened to me.
For non-librarians, I might have to ask you what OCLC is.
Yes, Online Computer Library Center,
Uh-huh.
which is like the Google of library worlds. That's where it used to be, I guess. Now things are maybe different, but that's where the World Catalog, was
Okay.
came into being and is maintained. And then I came here. It was a contract position at YouTube, Google, and I did copyright education for YouTube content creators for a year. And then I was at Stanford as part of Highwire Press. And then somehow I kind of wanted to not be in a cubicle. And I wanted to be in front of students. I think academia was, given my own interest in education and reading, academia kept calling to me, and I decided I'm going to quit the job. I'm sure I'll find something, and I did. Six months later, I did find a position at Notre Dame de Namur University. It's
Also in the Bay Area.
in Belmont, and I loved it. It was a quaint, small university. I felt that I went home to work. I have very, very fond memories, but I also realized I needed to do something different. And also the idea of community colleges, the idea of open access really appealed to me. And again, I feel like I applied to Skyline and I got it. So that's how I have been. And now I've been there since January of 2018.
Wow. Well, of course, and we're so delighted that you're here. And the whole mission of our Global Educators Network, with cooperation from Stanford Global Studies, is to outreach and support community college educators nationwide. So that's really what brings us here, and that's what brought you to our inquiry meetup, because that's a place that we have a kind of Socratic dialogue, a little bit of webinar, and a lot of Socratic dialogue about how to internationalize community college education in a whole variety of arenas, libraries being at the heart of any community college campus. I think that's something that we'll talk about more. I guess my idea was that I was so fascinated with your presentation at the Inquiry Meetup that I was hoping that you might review some of your slides with me.
Well, I should say thank you for the second chance to share, some of the ways
Encore, encore, encore.
for sharing what we have been doing at Skyline College and how we are able to offer our community opportunities to engage, and thereby and we have transformed what was once sort of a quiet, perhaps even passive library space into a vibrant hub. Thing that I have always wanted, and I think what we have been able to do is create a place where our community comes together. Our students have shared experiences, irrespective of their majors, something that's not tied to their grade, are able to connect with their lived experiences, with their own values, as well as the values of the college. And of course, among them are diversity, inclusion, awareness of global issues, and being exposed to different ways of experiencing and interpreting the world, and thereby evolving as human beings, and also kind of developing sort of a critical global consciousness. So I think now it's a place where knowledge is not just in print, and flows one way, which is how often traditional libraries are looked at, but it is understood and co-created through conversation, storytelling, and collaboration. We have done so much, and I'm just going to kind of go over a few things that we have done. And I have to say that this would not be possible. None of this is possible without cross-campus collaborations and also institutional support through funding.
Okay, and I'll mention the article that we want to cover also. Pia was working collaboratively with another professor, and our two other presenters at the Inquiry Meetup had worked together. So this collaboration aspect of librarians working with professors directly, and of course with students, is a huge part of the message. Go right ahead, Pia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the only way that we can actually impact student success. And working in the library, I don't feel like I belong to one division or department. And I'm personally, as an educator, I'm kind of against the idea of disciplines and divisions, because we kind of divide our way of solving the problems of the world. We become all, it's our understanding of everything is fragmented and partial. So I am more of a coming together, bringing things together, a more holistic way of looking at the world. So anyway, so going to our human library, which is one of our most loved events, and some of, I think there are librarians obviously acquainted with the idea of what is a human library, but it is based on the idea that we often have prejudices about people that we have never met, and we tend to focus on what divides us as opposed to what is common or what unites us. But just a 20-minute one-on-one conversation would allow us to see our similarities and commonalities. And this is an event where we offer opportunities for our community to engage in conversations with people often who have felt stigmatized or marginalized because of many reasons, because of their background, because of something they were born with, or because they chose, or just life circumstances. It could be health, it could be color of the skin, it could be diet, it could be a profession, it can be anything. And we often have a tendency to kind of relate to and associate with people like us. So Human Library kind of provides a space for people to meet people who are not like us. And so in a Human Library, people who volunteer to share their stories are referred to as human books, and those who listen to their stories and engage in one-on-one conversation are called readers. And before the pandemic, we provided spaces for readings in the library with some yummy food. And you can see some of the pictures there. And then later on, we moved because of the pandemic, when we were forced to transition online, we started providing those spaces in Zoom. And what is unique to Skyline is that we have held multiple events throughout the year. Sometimes libraries do it just once a year or once in a while, But as you can see, we've had 12 events, 74 book title offerings, and 274 reads or conversations. And also unique to Skyline is the concept of human book mixer. The human books get a chance to engage in conversation with each other. So for organizers, for us, it's a way to say thank you to our volunteers, but also give them an opportunity to read at each other, because during the events, they're so busy talking to their readers or the people who are engaging in conversations with them that they can't talk to each other, but they're so curious about each other. So that is what is unique to Skyline also. And based on the feedback that I've received, so after every read or conversation, I will have the readers as well as the books fill out evaluation forms. And one of the common things that I see is what students, especially how students get inspired by the stories they hear. So it goes beyond just overcoming prejudices. It's about it's like learning from stories of how people have overcome those, how in spite of the stigma, taboo, marginalization, how they have blossomed. And so for me, I always feel like it's, to borrow the term from Alain de Botton, it's almost like become like a school of life. Yeah, so that's what, and then one of the things I often get is like students, our community want to see more events, and so we'll see where that goes. Next slide.
Oh yeah, and actually, before we jump to the next slide, I want to mention. I think I mentioned it at the inquiry that my college, Foothill College, under the leadership of my English department colleague Allison Herman, and in close collaboration with our library, we also have run a human library event, although admittedly only once a year, unlike you. But the feedback, I mean, it is an iconic and beautiful and powerful event. And for any of you in any field that might be listening in, there's a world organization, Human Library. I think it's humanlibrary.org. You might actually remember, Pia. But anyway, it's very easy to Google it. It started in the Netherlands or Denmark. I'm trying to remember.
Denmark.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and they have support examples. I think what both Pia and I can say about it is that you can take their template and modify it somewhat in a community college setting. We also made some modifications, actually quite similar to yours in certain ways. And just as an example of like people who might be marginalized but not sort of not be read that way immediately, I've served as a book several times as an adult child of an alcoholic, and as an openly gay educator who grew up like very much in the closet. So with those two sort of hats on, that's how people would check me out as a book. So I would be the book, they would come check out Scott, and then we would just have a conversation about what was it like for you growing up in an alcoholic family. What kind of steps and strategies did you take and make to extricate yourself from that? This has always been part of my teaching practice. And then also I'm a very out educator, so have some nice conversations about what was it like growing up gay back in the day, that kind of thing. So that's just to give an example of me as having been one book, right? But the depth of conversations I had with students, and especially with the other books, just participating, were life-changing for me. I mean, I've really had some conversations that were among the very best in my 30 plus years as a community college educator. And since we're all educators together, you know that that's an amazing statement, right? Because in a way, we have these kind of conversations every day, but it does create a unique and valuable space. So I just wanted to add my own cheerleading, the idea of human library as one beautiful way to internationalize libraries on community college campuses and really anywhere else. Now I will honor your request and move to the next slide, Pia, having said all of that.
No, thank you for that. That is so true. It is, it's a very empowering experience for both books and the readers, and it is mutually satisfying. It's not one way, even though there's a book and a reader. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue. So we do many other events, and we try to tie our events together with issues and movements that are current and impact our students directly. So we might all remember that just a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about building the border wall. And we decided to respond to that by building a wall, not of division, but support, dialogue, and collaboration. So we collaborated with the Dream Center. We provided art supplies and encouraged our community members to create little posters and placards, as you can see. And then we have this huge wall behind the reference desk in the library. And so people participated, and they put posters and placards and wrote messages of support. We encouraged them to write their own immigrant stories. We provided some materials to craft flowers or butterflies, whatever they wanted to make, to symbolize acceptance and love. And that was in the wall. And as you can see, there was a lot of traffic. People were very engaged, and it was a beautiful event.
Yeah, and I'll jump in again, a theme, and this one reason that I really wanted to talk to you again after your presentation at the Inquiry Meetup, because a consistent theme of everything that you're doing at Skyline is everything is interactive, right? Human library is deeply interactive at a deep human level. And again, I think, and nothing wrong with it. I mean, I think many libraries might say, okay, here's a number of resources and make a little display about resources for undocumented students. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with putting resources out there because students need them and educators need them too, or making a LibGuide for undocumented students, all that kind of stuff. But what I think is even more powerful here, and not necessarily a great deal more work, right, is to create a space for interaction between students and students and us as educators, students and the whole community. And I think that, as I often like to say, that's what makes the information part stick, right? It's stories that make statistics stick. It's stories that make information stick. And so I think you're literally creating these dialogic, interactive spaces. And I do think that that is very powerful and empowering for the students themselves. You're giving them a voice in this conversation. And that is, instead of like, shh, it's a library, don't talk, right? So the way I grew up,
Yeah.
but this is, I hadn't thought of framing it that way, but yeah, this is the opposite of shh, don't talk. It's like, use your voice in the library. You bring resources to us. We don't just bring resources to you. You have lives, experience, knowledge, cultural knowledge, experiential knowledge, knowledge of all kinds. And inviting students to bring that into the library and share it in the library is a very different model than that model that little me grew up in all those years ago. Even though I loved my library, by the way, this is not an accident that I became an English professor, so no shade on that. But what I wasn't invited to do very often was to use my own voice in the library. In fact, quite the opposite.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm a very non-traditional librarian. So as I said, I came to library from tech and many different areas. I
Yeah.
taught German. And I believe in the power of community, and just even knowing the support that we have from the people that we're sharing space with. So there's one thing about information, and that, as you said, that yes, stories are so powerful, and you can actually see that information being employed and applied, and actually see the fruits of what that did, creating a vibrant space for students where they're not graded, where they don't have the tension of who's watching them, the professor and all that. They're engaging and really connecting with other students on their campus, no matter what their backgrounds are. And I like, in everything that I try to plan, or even we have a team, I'm not alone, and I would not be able to do this without their creativity and enthusiasm and all that. But what we try to do is we kind of create space for something to happen and try to step back. Like, that is because I have learned so much from students. As you just said, there's so much knowledge, lived experience that is right there. And we're providing a space for that to blossom and show up and voice, and everything is just so satisfying. It's very, very
And I
satisfying.
love what you just said, because it had not occurred to me, because it's another thing that shuts down students' voices is this constant, the constant grading, the constant assessment. And again, that has its place in education, of course. I'm an educator. But I had not thought as consciously about the fact that these kinds of events in a library, at least for the most part, is not a graded space. It's a space where you share information, right? Where we
Yeah.
share stories. That's the heart of every library on the planet. That's how we got here. And I
Mhm.
think that's really something fundamental to underline is that creating events where students can use their voice, bring the richness of cultural experience, of knowledge, of linguistic experience, all kinds, right, into a space where it's not about being judged, it's about sharing and creating community. And that can transform their entire perception of the whole campus,
Yeah.
not just the library, right? Like
Right.
that really is a depth empowerment, which makes the library the beating heart of the campus, which is what it's supposed to be.
And
That's
also
the idea.
the shared experience that you might be doing math or
Right.
art or chemistry, but you could still care about your DACA, the students on campus, or just be engaged in ways and know that, I think again, going back to what I was saying, that we have kind of divided everything. And I think this is a place to bring that together. So it doesn't matter whether you're studying chemistry or art, or I don't know, business. We are all human beings, and matters that affect human beings affect all of us, and we all have a say, and we all have a way to respond to it, and a responsibility. Actually, I feel we as human living in a democratic society, we have rights and responsibilities. So we sometimes forget the responsibilities. We always ask about the rights.
Yeah, certainly double underline that. Okay, are you ready for the next
Yes, I
slide?
am. And talking about rights, I have, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of, there we go.
So yeah, it was like I was kind of surprised it was so late that in November 2019, the Crown Act was passed in California, and Crown stands for Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And this act prohibits race-based hair discrimination in employment or in educational opportunities. And we hosted an event to celebrate the passing of the act, as well as celebrating natural hair. And people from our community gathered to share
Oh,
these
yeah.
stories and discrimination. And they brought there are people who brought their parents and grandparents with them.
Oh, yeah,
As
because
we
boy, do
can,
parents have to suffer through that.
yeah,
I
and
have
all
so
they
many
had
non-traditional, well,
that,
parents who have to try to navigate that ridiculous system. Thank God it's illegal now. It's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah.
Of course, I
Um,
have a different set of problems. I have different kind of hair issues. Um, but
yeah,
I love what you're doing here. And once again, I see people raising their hand and contributing and
yeah.
sitting in circles
And
and
that is
not being
most,
graded
that's
and
how,
judged, but being invited to bring a wealth of community and cultural and personal and individual and experiential knowledge and share it. Like libraries can share experiences, right?
yeah.
Not just books.
Yeah, and I can't help but point the image that's, I think, at the bottom right, because that I feel is what our events are about. That firstly, as you just pointed out, we all sit in a circle, so nobody's in the front or back, and doesn't matter who you are in the institutional hierarchy. We sit in a circle, and depends where you got in, what time you got in. Nobody gets up to give you the cushy seat, and it is a place where people feel comfortable to speak up, as there's this one person raising the hand, but then there's another person trying to raise it a little higher, amplifying the voice of another person, right?
Mm.
Which is what I feel that, we so myself and the co-organizers, we co-create, we provide those spaces, but then the people who come create those and empower each other, as you can see in that picture. And I feel like that's something that our events have become, where we just provide a space and they empower each other.
And of course, natural hair displays is not like necessarily books and photographs and information in a little glass case. It can also be come to the library and let's all celebrate our wonderful diversity of students on the campus and all the different kinds of hairstyles that they bring with them.
So poetry, we are all also poetry lovers. And Poetry Corner is another of our recurrent events that we've been hosting for a few years now, and that is in a collaboration with the Language Arts Division. We have some honorary librarians there who are such a part of the library. And again, these events are also tied to themes of diversity, equity, social and ecological justice, intersectionality, and so on. And for just an example, the picture that's in the middle and the top is from a Poetry Corner event we did in October 2019. And October is when Filipinx History Month, LGBTQ History Month, and Undocumented Student Action Week are celebrated. And so we were able to invite a published poet who identifies as queer, who originally came to the US from Philippines as an undocumented immigrant child. So we were able to really bring that to all together. And again, as you see, we were sitting in circle, even though we had a published poet, and not in those stuffy seating arrangements. And as we transitioned online, we moved our events online as well. And we were able to then invite, which was much easier to invite published poets and poet laureates from across the country. And as you can see from the flyers, we had themes on ecofeminism and activism and poetry, and how can we envision our world differently after the pandemic, and so on. And no matter who we invite, or whether we do it in person or in Zoom, again, we were always very mindful that we create democratic and egalitarian spaces with students. Community members feel free to share. So we have a student who's reading one of their poems, but this is very common. It's just one picture. But we often have students who will, like, I've written a poem, can I share? And so they are always sharing the same space with, very published writers or well-known artists.
Which
So
is so empowering. And of course, the literature teacher just loves that you're using words like change and empower and activist in the same phrase with poetry, because it shatters that stereotype as poetry, poetry that's something you're going to get graded down on an English paper once in your life and never encounter ever again, which is a great lie, but it's also something that silences so many students in so many ways. So I think the empowerment aspect and the activist aspect too, right? That words matter, that words make change in the world, and of course they do. But I think sometimes the messages that we give to students don't emphasize that enough, or at least that's what they feel they've heard throughout their whole education, right? Even if it's not coming from us, we have to overcome, in some degree, a lifetime of, I'll say it bluntly, silencing. We talk, you listen. This is not about your empowerment, it's about ours. This is not about you becoming an activist, it's about you becoming passive. And then if you're sufficiently passive, I might give you an A if you tell me what I think in the way that I want you to tell me. That's not what community colleges are about, right?
no.
College educators, that's not community college.
Exactly, because there was this like sage on the stage, and then it became guide on the side. And actually, my attitude when I'm with students is like, we're in this together, and we'll figure
Yeah,
this out together.
well said. The fact that we're called community colleges is fundamental to me. It's so brilliant to use a community college library in particular in this very empowering and activist way to create communities, to create, empower, and also mix and blend communities so that they can hear each other too. That's another thing that I see going on in these little circles. Even though, for example, the last slide is about Black History Month, and which is fantastic, but people from all walks of life are there. And people like me that need to learn more about what is it like to be a Black woman or a Black male and deal with these horrific laws about hair. I think that the community building is in all kinds of different directions, and that's what, for me, community colleges are about. That's what, for me, when we say Global Educators Network or internationalizing the curriculum with the Global Educators Network, what do we mean? And I think it's that cross-community knowledge and empowerment of individual communities that is what makes it so exciting for me.
Last year, for the first time, we hosted a Poetry Corner event to celebrate poems written in non-English languages, because so many of the events that we have done, it was always English. Or if somebody had written something, and so especially our students, if they had written it in their native tongue or mother tongue, they would tell us what they wrote about in English. And I thought we should have a space. And I myself speak 6 languages, so languages are very dear to me, and celebrating them is very important to me. And so I thought, let's do that. We'll see how that goes. And it was a very emotional experience for a lot of our faculty, staff, and students, as it was their opportunity to speak and hear their language, at an institution that is, for them has been English privileging academic institution. And some of them were in tears. So it was kind of a very touching, very beautiful event. And poems were read in several languages, including French, German, Hindi, Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, Tagalog, Tamil, Urdu, and then followed by the translations of those poems in English. I might have even missed some languages. And actually, we are doing another event on 17th of this month.
Oh, really?
Same thing again, international poetry in multiple tongues. So, and
I'm
we
in
have
town. I might even
actually.
invite myself to that.
Yes, I can send you the link. And actually, we have someone who's going to read a poem in sign language. So that was
Oh, yes. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So,
Oh,
I'm excited about that.
that
So,
is really exciting. And we had yeah, I think the highlight for me of the inquiry meetup where you presented was, some conversation that we had afterward with the participants because it's very Socratic. But several people were pointing out like how moving it was for them just to hear about this as
mhm.
multilingual speakers, just like yourself. How many times have I heard any language other than English? It goes right along with the shh.
Yeah.
Several of the participants in the audience called out how much it meant to them that you had sponsored these events, right? And it also seems to me that, yeah, I'm sure it's work, but it's not, it's doable, right?
Oh,
Like, I
yes.
don't look at this event and think, oh my God, I could never find the time and the energy to pull that off. Like, it is something that can be done with the kind of low budget, overwhelmed staff that we all work with in public education, but it's possible to do it on your own campus.
I mean, in fact, I haven't even sent out the flyer for this event that we are doing on November 17th, and I already have three people. One,
They're already
one reading in Portuguese, one reading in Farsi, and one reading in sign language, just because they
well,
know
there.
we're
See, isn't
doing
that amazing though?
it. Talking about foreign languages, we also hosted a film festival. The theme was Vital Voices, Transformative Stories of Middle Eastern Women. And this was funded by the San Mateo Community College District Grant and was a collaborative project with the Social Sciences and Creative Arts Division, the International Student Program Office, and the library. And we screened two films, The Judge and We Are Not Princesses. And The Judge is about the first woman judge in Palestine and a fight for justice for women. And We Are Not Princesses focuses on Syrian women living as refugees in Beirut who learn about their own strength and courage as they rehearse Sophocles' Antigone. And
Oh
then they
my,
compare
wow.
their plight, her plight, their own plight with Antigone. So it was very, very powerful. And we had a panel discussion with the producer of both movies, a couple of Skyline instructors, one of film studies and one of history. We had an instructor of this, from the Silicon Valley Intensive English Program, editor-in-chief of our student newspapers, the president of the CSM's College of San Mateo's Muslim Student Union. So again, it was a district-wide thing. We had people from the community, we had the producers. The collaboration went beyond just Skyline. And this was done virtually, and participants were able to interact throughout. And it was very interesting to see. So this was done in a platform called Ovi. And as they were watching the film, there were a lot of things in the chat, and we could see even people didn't know each other, but they were forming this kind of conversation as though they were sitting around in the same room watching the film. And that was also really, this is during the film, and then of course during the panel discussion, but that itself was also it was a community that came together through chat. And they had this one film or this one character that they were kind of talking about, and then relating to their experience of either having married into a family like that, or having left a family, or being born and then now living here. So that was also very, very powerful, something that people remember as a very powerful event.
No, I can certainly see why. And it's a beautiful event. And what I love is, in addition to having a film festival, a fairly traditional thing that a library might sponsor, but then to bring a number of people in together for dialogue, follow-up dialogue, more discussion, bringing their own expertise, not just the filmmakers' expertise, but their knowledge. The student leader for the Muslim Students Association creates again a kind of community of voices where it's not just come, watch this film, and then go home, but it's come be a member of this community and use your voice in this community also. And it's a really a wonderful and consistent theme. You were born to be a community college librarian. You understand community.
So from film, maybe to a speaker series, we were able to bring a very inspirational speaker, Mark Lopez. He is a grassroots environmental justice activist and recipient of the International Goldman Environmental Prize. And often, I think one of the things that, again, talking about, division of things, I think that so many times people who are involved in social justice are doing their work here, and then sustainability people are doing their work here. And then in my mind, it's always justice. It's justice it's a social and ecological justice, because we treat humans and environment like they're things that we can just abuse and exploit for the gold or for the profit, right? And so they go kind of, in at least in my eyes, go together. And so this person, his talk focused on Mark Lopez. His talk focused on the root causes of environmental racism and the importance of community organizing and civic engagement to fight environmental racism. One of the things we did was we made sure that faculty had incorporated this talk into their courses or their assignments. We encouraged faculty to even provide extra credit or somehow help students tie them into their research. And as you can see, there's an example of a student reflection on the talk, and they mention how they recognize the issue of environmental racism that Mark talked about, and also connects it with their research on the Flint water crisis.
Oh, and this is wonderful too, because again, they're using their voices, but since I'm a writing teacher, they're using their writing voice as well
Yes, yes.
in a way that's empowering. It's not judged, it's not graded. And often that produces some of the very best writing we get. You know this if you're a writing teacher. I think that the pressure of the grade has its place, but it also can be a silencing mechanism as well. And of course, since my association with Stanford Global Studies and the educational program to internationalize the curriculum that Jen grew out of is all about climate change across the curriculum, this all makes me very happy. I do want to say, I mean, I don't know, you're sure pulling in some fantastic speakers. The Goldman Environmental Prize is one of the premier environmental prizes on the planet. And Mark Lopez is certainly a world-class leader. So I think these events also are a way to bring in not just local community leaders, but community leaders from around the world so that we expand our definition of community in community college. Like, it is absolutely fundamental. Yes, we serve our local community. That is so fundamental. That's what Mark does. But at the same time, that community can extend beyond the sort of physical boundaries of our college district and our campus. And libraries are a fantastic place to bring that to bear. And so, sure, you can buy Mark Lopez's book and put it on the shelf,
Mhm.
but inviting him in is even more powerful. So I think you certainly found some brilliant ways to expand the definition or amplify the definition and enhance the definition of community in the words community college.
Awareness that local community is part of the global community,
Mm,
and the global community is
exactly.
it includes us, right?
That's our
And
mission.
so
You might have just rewritten our mission statement for us. Maybe I'll have to give you credit.
yeah, and so it's also that awareness, and so that has been that's something that shows up in everything I do, my teaching, the events or whatever I do. It's that being able to connect that, because we are part of the world.
No, we really are. And I actually was, when we get through the slides, I'm going to ask you about your research as a matter of fact,
Sure,
or
sure, sure.
preview of coming attractions.
These are examples of some of the events that we've done with the global social justice DEIA lens. And the focus has been raising critical global consciousness rather than teaching global competencies. And something, again, there's this, and it is part of my research too, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that later. But often when we talk about internationalizing our campuses or syllabi, or teaching for our students to become global citizens, we're talking about competencies that will help them thrive in a capitalist global market economy and being globally employable and cosmopolitan and be able to, but that's just kind of teaching them what the problem of the world is, that we just created this extractionist, exploitative way of
Yeah.
having a good affluent life of mindless consumption. And so that is where I feel like this global citizenship, or this education of being a global citizen is not so much about thriving in that economy, but more so creating a more just, like more global justice, local justice connected with global justice, local equity connected with global equity. These are like humble attempts to kind of raise that kind of consciousness where students critically reflect on their own self, their identity, privilege, role in the world, and how smallest choices and actions can have global impacts. And I do want to say, I know you just mentioned about being able to bring a speaker like Mark Lopez, or getting the rights to the licensing and movies, or just the food and all that. Disciplines have come together. It is a
Right.
cross-disciplinary effort. Divisions have come together and would not have been possible without the generous grants that the library has received, which at Skyline we call them PIFs, or President's Innovation Fund grants. And so I do want to say that, none of this would be possible. We get so used to working with less and having limited budgets that we don't think something can be possible, even though we have those ideas.
Oh,
So I
well
just
said.
wanted to mention
Well, your
that.
presentation seems like living proof. I mean, it's amazing what you've been able to achieve, and the range of events and the depth and the power of the events is genuinely impressive. And of course, that's the thing. Like our audience is other community college educators. We all know what you're talking about. When we're all under resourced, we're all overwhelmed, and yet I think that time and time again we make the magic happen, and that's partly why we're here on the Gen channel, is to give each other that sort of inspiration. Do you want to say some words about your so in your non-existent spare time, when you're not being a full-time librarian, associate professor, and running these world-class events, somehow you're getting your PhD at San Francisco State. Do you want to say a little bit about your research?
Based on the success of the grants that I have received, I also received another grant recently, which is connected to my research topic of global citizenship education. So again, like one grant can lead to another grant too. So maybe we start with a smaller grant, and then
Jen's
based
trying to
on
do a little of that too.
right, and and then once when people see, oh, they're really doing something with the money, then they give you more money. And so yes, so my research topic is actually about how can we teach to develop critical global consciousness in our students. And because normally when we talk about global learning, we think about sending a few students to another country or bringing international students, and that's where it stops, right? And I kind of feel this is one way, like a college or an institution can create spaces for students to have the shared experiences, but actually we could also teach differently. We could be more mindful about what we're teaching. Science did not start just 400 years ago. People have been living forever and
Yes.
healing themselves,
Uh-huh.
cooling themselves when it's hot, and
Absolutely.
warming themselves when it was cold, and taking care of their loved ones for way longer than industrialization and enlightenment. And so I kind of feel like there should be a way in which, there's a hierarchy of knowledge and epistemologies and who sits on the top, and the world has been divided and racialized and color coded and all that. And I think that maybe it's time to come in a circle as opposed to this hierarchy. And I think that a globalized curricula could do that, where it doesn't mean we have to hate anybody, or but we don't center one epistemology over other. Knowledge democracy, cognitive justice, let students decide what is mumbo jumbo or traditional knowledge or not. Let us not filter, right? And so my research topic is about how can a student who has not left their city be exposed to literature from different parts of the world, science from different parts of the world, it's possible to bring it in math, it's possible to bring it in physics, it's possible to bring it in chemistry. It doesn't have to, there's normally also like people think that, oh, this topic can only be brought in the liberal arts, or it can only be brought in literature or social sciences, but I don't agree with that. Like I've worked with faculty one-on-one to kind of develop assignments that are different, where students can bring their own culture. Even in a chemistry engineering class, we have done that, and so it's possible to do that. And so that is what my research is about. We underestimate our students. We feel like, oh, we should not be talking about these depressive topics. But they are the ones who are going to leave,
That's in their role.
and they're already thinking of it. And actually, maybe we should be listening to them instead of telling them. So that is my research topic, if that made sense at all, because I mean,
No,
I'm kind of
absolutely.
muddling through it.
No, it does, and it's clearly an extension of what you're doing as a librarian, as associate professor at Skyline College. Like it really flows out of what you're doing, which is the best of PhD research. In any case, I'll go ahead. I'm going to read this because I don't want to get it wrong, but it does seem to me that, for example, your recent article about teaching metaliteracy in the religious studies classroom is kind of a case in point of
Mhm.
what you're trying to talk about there. So do you want to, I can also read the abstract, but I'd rather have you do that. So can you give us in a nutshell kind of what your article was about in layman's language again, right? Or layperson's language? Um, because I do think it fits into this conversation, and it's an interesting way for us to start to begin to wrap up a little bit, just because, of course, I'm not expecting that everybody that listens to this little video cast is a librarian, right? Including the fact that the guy talking with you today is an English professor, not a librarian.
Mhm.
So I think it brings other professors and other disciplines into the conversation in a really fascinating way.
Absolutely. So one of the things that librarians teach is information literacy, and very basic definition, which I do not like to define it at all like that, but it's like find out what you need. So find your information need, find it, use it, and cite it, or something like that.
Here's
It's
how to
very
use this
basic.
search engine. Here's how to do this kind of citation. Again,
Exactly. However,
useful but very traditional way to teach a kind of
yeah,
course.
and the information landscape has changed. That did work when things were behind, the library, and the librarian knew what was going on, and like they were curated resources and all that. Now that information is at people's fingertips, and students are producers and consumers of information, what we can't be teaching them skills. We have to teach habit. We have to not even teach. We have to help them develop habits of mind, and to develop
Oh,
healthy
beautifully said.
skepticism towards whatever they come across.
Yeah.
And that cannot happen in this one-shot sessions that librarians often teach. Like show them how to search a few things and evaluate a few things, and in a 50-minute session. No, it needs sustained conversations and working in community again, right? And so that paper is about what Professor Marianne de Laporte at NDNU and we had co-taught a class. We literally sat together. I had 5 or 6 sessions with her students, not just one session. We co-created the syllabi. We decided what they were going to read. We decided what the assignments were, and all the assignments were also Web 2.0. They were writing wikis and blogs and creating podcasts and websites, as opposed to the
Perfect. Yeah.
paper, because a lot of our students are not writing papers when they go into the workplace. And so that paper is more about a real library faculty and instructional faculty collaboration to help students develop these dispositions and habits of mind, as opposed to teach them a few skills.
Mm,
Dispositions stay with them. They go beyond that class.
mm.
They stay with them. They help them become lifelong learners, to think about like some of the things we were talking about, to develop that criticality, right? When they're looking at information, or question also like, why is this information only focusing on a certain demographic? Where is the information from? Whose voice is silenced? Those things take time. They come with an embedded teaching experience, as opposed to this one shot that librarians often do, which I'm not a very big fan of. I try not to do that. So that is what that paper is about.
I love your phrase habits of mind. We try to build the habit of reading from a very young age, from infancy forward. We're trying to build the habit of reading, and we have all the brain science now that shows how powerful that is. and how essential that is and how empowering that is. But I think what's very interesting as a way to sum up our whole conversation is that there are other habits of mind that a library can also instill,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
those habits in mind include using your own voice, forming communities not just with
Mhm.
people who are like you, but with people who are very unlike you, sharing that information, sharing the knowledge experience, of the community experience, the cultural experience, the knowledge that you have, so that it is a two-way street when you walk into the library. Like, so this was not just a collaboration between you and the students, it was a collaboration between you and the religious studies professor and the students that really spanned the whole
Mhm.
semester.
Mhm.
And that then becomes a habit of mind also, right? We're all working on this together. And it's not just like, okay, check, I did my 50-minute presentation with this person that I don't remember her name in the library, right? And all of a sudden they're having a real conversation with Pia, which may then also extend into other things that they do. So then they have a relationship with their librarian. They
Yeah.
know the librarian over a longer period of time. And as they move forward in their education or even later in their life, because we do serve whole communities, right? Globalizing issues becomes a habit of mind, using your critical thinking skills. So I love what you're doing, and I applaud what you're doing
Thank you so much.
deeply. It was actually quite a great privilege to spend more time with you. I have a little bit of a selfish thing that goes on with this Gen channel because I love these conversations. They're deeply enriching for me personally. I really mean that.
Mhm.
Uh, and this one was particularly so. So thank you so much for the excellent, wonderful conversation. Is there anything you want to add? I should be saying also, by the way.
No, just a big thank you for the opportunity to share and have this conversation. I enjoyed it thoroughly as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Stanford Gen YouTube channel. And you used to work for YouTube.